do not, I repeat, do not try to take advantage of consumers during this time. Nobody should be using this situation for financial gain. That's what the hackers are trying to do.
We are deeply sorry for the impact that this attack had.
Sure. Colonial Pipeline says it was hit by ransomware.
Tonight, the gas is flowing and the fear is fading.
I'm like, woo! Super happy.
News has learned Colonial Pipeline paid nearly $5 million in ransom to hackers.
I made the decision to pay, and I made the decision to keep the information about the payment as confidential as possible.
In May 2021, a single stolen password shut down 45% of the East Coast fuel supply for 5 days. No military attack, no natural disaster. One forgotten account brought America to its knees. The Colonial Pipeline attack exposed how fragile modern critical infrastructure really is. Colonial Pipeline stretches 5,500 miles from Houston, Texas to Linden, New Jersey, forming the country's longest refined products pipeline. Each day, more than 100 million gallons of gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and home heating oil move through its underground arteries, accounting for about 45% of the East Coast's total fuel supply. The network serves 13 states and the District of Columbia, delivering energy to major cities, airports, and military bases. This scale means that any disruption, no matter how small the cause, can ripple outward in unpredictable ways. The pipeline's centrality to daily life, commerce, and national security turns it into a single point of failure. The consequences of an outage do not just stop at the pump. They reach airports, hospitals, and emergency responders. The system's reach and importance set the stage for what would become a crisis with national consequences, triggered not by a storm or sabotage, but by a weakness hidden deep within its digital defenses.
DarkSide is a ransomware-as-a-service network. That means developers who sell or lease ransomware to use in attacks in return for a fee or a share in the proceeds.
DarkSide surfaced on Russian-language cybercrime forums in August 2020, not as a shadowy hacker collective, but as a polished business. Its operators maintained a public-facing website, issued press releases, and even claimed to donate a portion of their profits to charity. The group's message was clear. They were professionals, targeting corporations for profit, not chaos. Hospitals, schools, and nonprofits were declared off-limits, a calculated move to avoid public backlash and law enforcement scrutiny. The real innovation came in their business model. DarkSide operated as ransomware-as-a-service, called RaaS. Instead of conducting every attack themselves, they built and maintained the malware, then rented it out to affiliates. These partners, often freelancers or small groups, would choose the targets, carry out the intrusions, and handle negotiations. In exchange, DarkSide took a cut, usually between 10 and 25%, leaving affiliates with as much as 75 to 90% of each ransom paid. Within just 9 months, DarkSide and its affiliates collected about $90 million from 99 known victims. Nearly half of those organizations paid, with the average payout reaching $1.9 million. The group's malware included a built-in check for Russian and other former Soviet languages, deliberately skipping any machine set to those locales. This was not just a technical quirk, it was a shield, signaling to Russian authorities that DarkSide would not target local entities. By branding themselves as principled and businesslike, DarkSide lowered the psychological barrier for affiliates and, in some cases, for their victims. The promise was straightforward: pay the ransom, get your data back, and avoid public exposure. But this professional facade masked a relentless drive for profit, fueling a rapid escalation in attacks on critical sectors, including ultimately the infrastructure that millions depend on every day. At 2:45 a.m. on April 29, 2021, a dormant VPN account at Colonial Pipeline accepted a remote login. The account, forgotten by most of the IT staff, was protected only by a password, no multi-factor authentication, no recent activity logs, and no alerts for unusual access. The password itself had already been exposed in a previous unrelated data breach, floating for months in criminal marketplaces. With this single credential, the attackers bypassed the company's perimeter in minutes. A former Colonial engineer later described the account as a ghost, one of dozens left active after staff turnover and system upgrades. Internal security audits had flagged the risk, but remediation was delayed and the account remained open. Forensic analysis by Mandiant would reveal that once inside, the attackers moved quickly. By April 30th, they were mapping the internal network, harvesting credentials, and identifying privileged accounts. They collected directory data, gaining a blueprint of Colonial's digital environment. The intruders exploited a flat network architecture, bridging from IT systems into operational technology zones. They used pass-the-hash techniques to escalate privileges, eventually reaching the engineering workstations that controlled pipeline operations. On May 6th, nearly 100 gigabytes of sensitive data were quietly exfiltrated over an encrypted channel, including system logs, architecture diagrams, and employee credentials. An anomaly-based intrusion detection system detected the large outbound transfer but failed to block it. Hours later, the DarkSide ransomware payload was staged. Encryption keys were generated on critical SCADA workstations, but the final trigger was held back. At 4:58 a.m. on May 7th, the ransomware executed, locking over 500 servers and halting the ability to send commands to pumps and valves. The breach chain, from a single reused password to total loss of control, unfolded in less than 8 days. The technical failures were not exotic exploits, but the result of overlooked basics, weak authentication, ghost accounts, and insufficient network separation. The shutdown of Colonial Pipeline sent shockwaves through the daily routines of millions. By May 9th, President Biden declared a regional emergency.
I want to update everyone on the ransomware cyber attack that impacted on the Colonial Pipeline over this past week. In the meantime, I want to update you on what our administration is doing to accelerate this process, to mitigate shortages, and to protect you from price gouging. First, we relaxed the rules for pipeline operators to provide flexibility for emergency personnel to help manually get portions of the pipeline up and running earlier this week. Secondly, over the weekend, we reviewed and worked with the company to get a portion of the pipeline system from North Carolina to Maryland to operate under manual control and deliver its existing inventory. In addition, we put in place emergency orders that lifts the hours restrictions and allowed states to lift weight restrictions for tank truck drivers to be on the road. Third, the Environmental Protection Agency issued a targeted 20-day waiver of standards in several states to give fuel suppliers more flexibility to use available fuels where they're needed, which will boost the fuel supply. And fourthly, as part of an effort to use every possible means to accelerate fuel deliveries, last night I granted a waiver of the Jones Act to fuel suppliers. This allows non-U.S. flagged vessels to transport refined fuel products from the Gulf of Mexico to affected areas. Don't panic, number one. I know seeing lines at the pumps or gas stations with no gas can be extremely stressful, but this is a temporary situation. Do not get more gas than you need in the next few days. As I also want to say something to the gas stations. Do not, I repeat, do not try to take advantage of consumers during this time. I'm going to work with governors in the affected states to put a stop to price gouging wherever it arises. And I'm asking our federal agencies to stand ready to provide assistance to state-level efforts to monitor and address any price gouging at the pump. Nobody should be using this situation for financial gain. That's what the hackers are trying to do. That's what they were about, not us.
In Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp suspended the state fuel tax, hoping to ease the strain on drivers as gas prices surged and supplies vanished. Within 48 hours, nearly 10,600 gas stations from the Carolinas to New Jersey reported empty pumps. Lines of cars stretched around blocks. Some motorists resorted to filling plastic bags with gasoline, ignoring warnings from the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Fuel shortages rippled through the aviation sector as well. Airlines rerouted more than 400 flights out of East Coast hubs, adjusting schedules to avoid airports with depleted jet fuel reserves. First responders faced their own crisis. Fire departments in cities like Charlotte logged over 20 calls where trucks could not refuel, while some hospitals in Virginia postponed non-urgent surgeries after their backup generators ran low. Inside Colonial's Crisis Command Center, the board faced a grim calculus. With every hour offline, the risk to public safety and the economy grew. On May 8th, CEO Joseph Blount authorized a ransom payment of 75 Bitcoin, about $4.4 million at the time.
I made the decision to pay, and I made the decision to keep the information about the payment as confidential as possible. It was the hardest decision I've made in my 39 years in the energy industry, and I know how critical our pipeline is to the country, and I put the interests of the country first. I kept the information closely held because we were concerned about operational safety and security, and we wanted to stay focused on getting the pipeline back up and running. I believe with all my heart it was the right choice to make.
Decision was unanimous, made after insurance coverage limits, FBI guidance, and the mounting human impact were weighed. The decryptor tool provided by DarkSide restored only a fraction of files, forcing engineers to rely on off-site backups for full recovery. Partial pumping resumed May 12th, but it took until May 15th for the entire system to return to normal. The 5-day outage exposed just how quickly a single compromised password could cascade into a national emergency, and why Colonial saw no alternative but to pay. On June 7th, 2021, the Department of Justice announced a breakthrough.
After Colonial Pipeline's quick notification to law enforcement today, the Department of Justice has found and recaptured the majority of the ransom Colonial paid to the DarkSide network in the wake of last month's ransomware attack.
Federal agents had seized 63.7 Bitcoin from the ransom paid to DarkSide, a recovery worth $2.3 million at the time. The operation began with a simple but costly mistake by the attackers. An affiliate handling the payout left the ransom funds in the same cryptocurrency wallet used for future transactions, creating a clear path for investigators. Blockchain analytics firms, including Chainalysis, mapped the flow of funds across the public ledger, tracking every move despite attempts to obscure the trail with mixing services. Armed with this digital evidence, the FBI secured a court order and obtained the private key for the wallet, allowing agents to transfer the coins to government control. The price of Bitcoin had dropped sharply since the ransom was paid, reducing the amount recovered. Still, the seizure sent a message. Even in the world of cryptocurrency, operational missteps can leave criminals exposed. As one Department of Justice analyst put it, the affiliate's error made the money visible, and that is what allowed us to act. 5 failures cut through every layer of the Colonial Pipeline breach. The VPN that opened the door lacked multi-factor authentication, a gap flagged in a 2020 audit but left unresolved. Dormant, privileged accounts, ghosts from past projects, and staff turnover remained active, expanding the attack surface. The password used to log in had already been exposed in an unrelated retail breach, yet no controls were in place to catch this reuse. Despite an annual cybersecurity budget of $40 million, there was no ransomware response playbook, leaving the board to improvise under pressure. Most damaging of all, flat network architecture meant attackers could move from IT to operational technology without hitting a single firewall. These failures are not unique to Colonial. Post-incident audits at other major pipeline operators found similar ghost accounts and weak network segmentation. In response, Congress passed the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act of 2022, mandating breach reporting and multi-factor authentication for critical infrastructure. But as DarkSide rebranded as Black Cat, ransomware payments worldwide topped $1 billion in 2023, with energy sector attacks up 30%. The playbook for defense is now clear. Eliminate legacy accounts. Enforce multi-factor authentication, segment networks, maintain a tested incident response plan, and share threat intelligence. Anything less leaves the door open. Today, a single overlooked account can still threaten systems that millions depend on. DarkSide is gone, but ransomware groups now multiply and adapt. Critical infrastructure remains exposed until security failures are addressed, not just patched. The next breach is not a question of if, but when.